All right, welcome back, ladies and gents. It's Rocco Yaps, and I'm about to start yapping about the fight that happened yesterday, December 19th, on Friday. The anticipated match between Jake Paul and the late replacement, Anthony Joshua. And, if you haven't seen my video, I recommend you see my video that I posted yesterday, just giving out my opinions and who I believe was going to win from the very first fight all the way to the last one, and see how many I got wrong. So without further ado, let's start. Now, the first matchup was between Kino and Marley versus Davis Jr. As you can see on the screen, I'm showing you the evidence that I believed that Davis Jr. was going to win. And it was a bad start for your boy. I started off um, I started off going wrong. Kino ended up winning by unanimous decision. It was a pretty comfortable win. He was just doing his business against Davis Jr. And yeah, I started off on the wrong foot this night, thinking that Davis was going to take the victory. Second fight of the night. This was an anticipated one for me because both styles and both of these guys are like trying to enter the prospect, like being a respectable prospect and be taken serious as a prospect. It was a fight between Avius Griffin versus Justin Cardona, where, as I predicted, as you can see on screen, I had Griffin winning by 70% chance. I had him even more favorite of him winning his fight than I did in the previous fight with Davis Jr. beating Kino. But this one was, I didn't expect it to be as fast as it did. I expected Cardona to kind of put in a little pressure and hang in there with Griffin a little longer. But TKO victory in the first round for Griffin, how much easier can it get than that? So, your boy was right on that. So far, 1-1. Moving on to the third fight, we have Yacasta Vale versus Yadira Bustillos, where, as you can see here, I had a 70% chance for Vale taking the victory. I stated earlier that, in my other video predicting that I just thought Vale was just going to be a little bit too much for Bustillos, that she didn't have the experience in terms of the amount of fights, the amount of pressure of those fights, going for titles, and the level of caliber of fighters that Vale has over Bustillos was just, in my opinion, was just going to be too much for Bustillos to kind of handle. And I was right. Bustillos ended up winning. It was a little bit not as easy as I thought it was going to be for Vale, but she still ended up winning by majority decision. That is a second in a row correct that I have, that your boy Rocco got. So I'm 2-1 starting off, starting off the night, by the third fight being 2-1. It's not bad. But the fourth fight came around between Cherneka Johnson and Amanda Gale for the undisputed Bantam World Championship. Now, as you see, I also have again a 70% chance of winning for Johnson. Kind of the same thing as Vale versus Bustillos. I just think that Johnson doesn't have that much fights over Gale, but I thought, her experience of having a little bit more fights and then the caliber of fighters being a little bit better than Gale, and then that Johnson is the champion. She knows what it's like to fight for belts, a world caliber belt, and against world caliber fighters, and defending your titles against world caliber fighters. And the highest that Gale has ever gone is to become, you know, Canadian champ. So it's not to make it less of her accomplishments, but comparison that she's fighting for the undisputed bantamweight champion, it's not much to go off of. But your boy had Johnson winning by a 70% chance, which Johnson did beat by unanimous win. It was a clear win, and it was a clear just one-sided fight, and it was to the point where it was so one-sided that the only thing Gale was able to do over Johnson in terms of damage was a headbutt. Like, the only thing Johnson came out of there was a cut over her left eye. Like, if I remember right, it's right in between her eye and her eyebrow. So that little fat that's in between your eyebrow and your, basically on your eyelid, like right above your eyelid, and that same part on her forehead, a little swollen. But that was mainly caused by headbutt that Gale provided. I think it was around like the fourth round is when that headbutt was that ended up cutting her and gave her like that like swollenness on her forehead. I think it was like around the fourth, sixth round, around there. But like at the end of the day, like I said, this I just had Johnson winning. I didn't think Gale could have done anything really, you know, to Johnson. But it ended up being that way. Johnson came out. She was just doing her thing. Gale was trying to do her thing, and the most that she was able to do was give her a swollen forehead and a cut on her eye based off headbutting her instead of punching her. So, unanimous decision victory for the champion, remaining the undisputed bantamweight champion, and yet another victory for your boy in terms of prediction. Now we're moving to the battle of the unks, as I had it in my last video predicting. This fight was just interesting on paper, but it was interesting the night of the fight. Now, what what I didn't like is that every fight leading up to this fight was super intense or super bloody, or it was a really entertaining fight after fight. You had people knocking out each other, you had people hitting each other hard, bleeding. So it kind of sucked when people were kind of booing at these fools in the first round. Because for those who don't know, like when you're in a fight, in a boxing fight, the first round is always going to be the most boring because it's the one where you're studying your opponent. You're finding out the rhythm of your opponent. You're finding out what type of game plan he's trying to implement. You're trying to find out the range between you and him, the timing he has. What is his go-to thing when you throw this punch or when you throw that punch? What is his go-to thing as a reaction? And how can you, store that in your head to then capitalize later down the road and later rounds? And I think people in the audience got like spoiled that every fight was just kind of like pretty action packed, pretty impactful, pretty bloody, pretty like back and forth banging. And then these fools came out and they were kind of being more tactically sound. They were being, very wary of each other's power and abilities. But at the end of the day, second round came around. These guys started letting go a little bit more of their hands. As you can see, I had a 60% chance of Silva winning. The 60% chance was because Silva is a little older, and Woodley, in terms of boxing, does have stuff that favor him more than Silva. Silva, even though, like I said in my video, as to why I believed he was going to be the winner, I said he's overall a better fighter. But you got to remember, Woodley, when he was in the UFC, like the thing that he had was like the hooks. He had powerful hooks that would knock damn near anybody out. Silva, on the other hand, it was his feet. So Silva was known for his feet and his his powerful and dangerous leg kicks. But we're in a boxing match, so it's like who has the better advantage? Well, Woodley, because he's more comfortable and known with hurting and knocking out people with hooks, as opposed to Silva, who is now completely not being able to use two limbs that are his like go-to key thing. But I mean, an uppercut from Silva, perfectly placed, undetected by Woodley, undefended, not can't even dodge. Can't he didn't even have time to like clench his jaw to prepare for impact, and it was enough to daze him. Silva threw like three punches, one of them missed, two barely hit him, but not like clean punches, but they were enough to drop Woodley. He got counted. Go to this corner. The ref said he was good to go, and he even told him like fight. So Silva was coming at him. He was ready to come, but Woodley seemed to still not be okay, and he didn't even know what he was doing. He wasn't even reacting to Silva coming at him. So before Silva can even do anything, the refs jumped in and was like, you know what, never mind. Like, I thought Woolley was okay, but I'm clearly seeing now that he's not okay. I'm not sending him out there for Silva to give him more fucking CTE. So your boy's on a roll. Start off on the wrong foot. I got the fucking Davis Jr. versus Marley fight wrong, which was the first fight of the night. I said Davis was gonna win. He lost by unanimous decision. But everything from Griffin winning to Vale winning to Johnson winning, now Silva winning. Your boy's on a 4-win streak, and things are going pretty good. Now the co-main event of the night versus Alicia Baumgardner facing off Lilia Baudon. I don't know how to say her name still to this day. I don't think I ever will. But Baumgardner beat her, clear as day. She did her thing. It wasn't as dominant, but it was pretty clear victory for Baumgardner. She came out there and she looked better than her last fight, which was an important thing going into this fight. Was that her last fight that she had, she came out with the victory, like she did win, but it didn't look impressive. She didn't look good. She looked terrible, and she like barely managed to come out with the victory. So that was kind of the thing of like, is that gonna be the same Baumgardner this night against Layla, or are we gonna see the original Baumgardner that we're accustomed to seeing and that became world champion and unified champion? But a big talk about this fight, as you can see how I have it written down, it's women fight at their like the maximum that they're allowed to fight is 10 rounds, 2 minutes each round, as opposed to the men that could fight up to 12 rounds and all the rounds are 3 minutes. Baumgardner is one of those girls in women boxing that is like really trying to push for those rules being changed and letting women fight the same amount of time and same amount of rounds as men. Just switching it to, hey, let us fight championship fights for 12 rounds, and let every round that we ever fight be 3 minutes. And she's one of those people that's really pushing for this to the point where she's a 3-belt champion, but she decided to give up the WBC belt for the whole chance of making this fight like a normal male championship fight of 12 rounds, 3-minute rounds. Because for those who don't know, the WBC is like the most strict organization when it comes to that. Like they are heavy on being like zero tolerance to women fighting the same amount of minutes and rounds as men. So the WBC was basically telling her like, hey, we won't sanction this fight between you and Layla being 12 rounds, 3 minutes. And if you go with it, you won't be our champion anymore. So you'll go into this fight not being with our belt in play, and you'll have to fight again to get our belt back if you want to be undisputed or you want to be 3-belt unified again. And Baumgardner, like I said, she's very big in pushing for women being able to compete the same amount of time and distance as men do in boxing. That she was perfectly okay with giving that WBC belt away, which I thought was a pretty cool move. I'm one of those guys who I think it really hinders women boxing that they are not allowed to fight the same pace, the same distance, and the same minutes as any other male boxer does. Because like I said in my previous video, I told you like I go to the gym. Like I'm somebody who really loves boxing. I really train. I really spar, and I've been with other amateur fighters or other professional fighters that are barely starting their careers, and I've sparred with them, and it's like especially when I was a kid, before puberty really hit me, I would spar with girls, and it's like girls from all ages are training like the same amount of time as dudes, in the sense that when you go to a boxing gym, the bell, like basically the timer that lets you know that a round started. It's green, the round is still on. Yellow, the round is about to end, and then red is like the break time that you get, and then it goes back to green. You start working out again. That's a 3 minute timer. So it's like everybody's trained. It's not like, oh, guys only. We're gonna put 3 minute timer from you know 3 p.m. to 6 p.m. It's gonna be all guys, and 6 p.m. to 9 p.m. is gonna be only girls, and we're gonna change the timer to 2 minutes so that the girls could train. It's like no, like it's just 3 minutes. Everybody trains the same. Everybody trains. Everybody hits the bag in the mids, and shadow boxing and jump rope. Everybody does all their training on a 3 minute timer. So it's like I don't understand what's the point of being like. They even spar, like women spar at that pace too of 3 minutes. So it's like I don't see a reason why they can't fight a fight at 3 minutes. And especially if the women like Baumgartner and many others have said publicly that they're perfectly fine, that they're okay with it. It's like why stop them from that? You know, let them be. Like if they really feel confident that they could do, or they don't, they want to just fight the same normal, and they already train normally in 3 minutes. It's like just let them, just let them have the same distance uh, and time as the men. I see no reason why that should be a thing. But yeah, but going back to the fight, Alicia Baumgartner was the one I chose, and she is the one that came out victorious. So your boy is now at a 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 win streak. 5v1. The first fight of the night, I lost it. 5 against 1. That's not bad. Now the main event, and the reason why everybody tuned in, and the reason everybody was there. Anthony Joshua replacing Gervonta Tank Davis to face off Jake Paul in December, aka Judgment Day for Jake Paul. Now, here's the thing with this fight. I stated in my previous video, I'm not one of those fools who was like, Joshua is ruining his reputation, he's ruining his career, and he's ruining his legacy by accepting such a fight with Jake Paul. However, I did say I am one of those guys who think if he can't pack him up in 2 rounds, or if he can't do the same thing that he did to Francis Ngannou to Jake Paul, that he will ruin his reputation and his legacy and his career. But here's the thing. When I said that, I didn't have the information of Jake Paul in the negotiations to fight against Joshua, that he put in there the ring size being 22 fucking feet long. I mean, wide, you know. For those who don't know, that's a big fucking ring. And anytime a boxer has ever in the history of boxing has asked for a ring of that size, they purposely say, hey, in the contract of accepting and making this fight happen, I want the ring in which we're going to fight in to be this big. Anytime in the history of a fighter using that as a condition for the fight is because they plan on using that size of the ring for their game plan, in the sense of, I'm going to be running, whether I'm going to be running the whole time, or I'm going to sit there in the pocket, but there's going to be a pretty big amount of times in my game plan throughout the rounds where I'm going to need to run and avoid you. So I need the space to avoid you and run around. And when I heard that the day of the fight, like, I think it was like around Sylvia's fight, what they were talking about when Sylvia and Woodley were fighting, and they were talking about Jake and Joshua's fight. That they mentioned that, and I was like, oh shit, like okay, I did not know that was gonna be a thing. So I'm like, I think Joshua, with his previous history of not being able to really cut the ring, combined with it seems like obviously Jake is going to be running a lot, especially in the first rounds. I was like, okay, maybe his plan is to run the first three, maybe 4 rounds, and then proceed to kind of try to do something in the middle to close range. Is what I thought his plan was probably gonna be. Try to get Joshua frustrated and tired. Try to make him miss a lot, and even though if it's a little bit of punches, throw jabs, pick at him, which he was doing sometimes. Like he would throw a good clean jab, or you know, he would throw one good right that would land pretty good, and then he wouldn't do anything for the rest of the round. In my eyes, I was like, okay, if he's doing that, then he's purposely trying to do that to kind of sneakily take those rounds in his favor before he starts getting into the dangerous parts of fighting Joshua, which is like being less active, being less mobile, and being more at the mid to close range with him. And like I said, he was kind of doing that in the sense that he was moving around. Joshua couldn't touch him. He couldn't even do anything. He instead of cutting the ring, he was following him, and he was having difficulty um, letting his hands go properly on Jake because Jake was just moving around. And anytime Joshua got close to him, he would hug him. And it's not even like he would clinch him. Like he wasn't clinching Joshua. Like Jake was straight up using that wrestling background that him and his brother have, and actively seemed like he was trying to pin Joshua down to the ground on some wrestling shit, instead of your normal average clinch of like hugging your opponent or hugging his arms and making sure he doesn't do anything. Like Jake was actively looked like he was trying to take him down, like a leg takedown on Joshua, and Joshua just using his weight and his strength was just pushing Paul down to the ground, and Paul would just fucking immediately crumble to the ground anytime Joshua put his weight or used any amount of force to push him down. And yeah, so I'm not basically trying to make excuses of like why my mentality is changed from what I said about like, oh, if he can't do what he did to Ngannou to Jake, or if he can't take him out in 2 rounds, then it does ruin his legacy. I'm saying now that it still doesn't ruin his legacy. I don't think it ruins it. I'm not saying he did a good job or he was good or he was unstoppable. It just felt like those first rounds he was frustrated. Those first 2 to 3 rounds he was frustrated. He was, visibly annoyed, especially when you have the fact of like you can hear Jake's brother Logan in the corner with I don't know if that was Logan's girl or that was Jake's girl, but there was a girl next to Logan who I'm guessing is one of both of these guys' girls. And those two, the girl and Logan, were just talking shit the whole time. So you have these fucking clowns talking shit the whole time. And then you have this clown who, the moment, like literally the moment the first bell of the first round, like rung and was like the green light for the fight to finally begin, Jake turned on the burners. Like the moment that fucking bell rang, he was instantly in burners, and he was just running racetracks around Joshua using that big fucking ring size, and he was just doing that. He was just running around. He was trying to throw jabs to keep Joshua away, and anytime Joshua felt like he was getting close or he was about to unload something, and Jake couldn't run away, he would actively fucking try to grapple him and wrestle him, and then he would fall to the ground, or that he would hug for so long that the ref had to separate them. So that's what, like, when you combine all those things, like, I understand Joshua's frustration. So I feel like that also affected why Paul was able to survive as long. But then it kind of felt like around the end of the fourth round when Paul was just so fucking exhausted because he just has terrible conditioning. He just has terrible stamina problems. which is funny to me because like if that was your plan all along to be like we're gonna run the whole fucking night and we're gonna pick and jab and counter him with few rights here and there to kind of steal these rounds by points, even if they're by few punches, you're gonna need a lot of fucking conditioning. You need a lot of stamina. And it's like, it's just, I don't know. Jake had terrible fucking stamina. By the third round, he was exhausted. Most of the punches that Joshua barely was able to land, they were blocked. But it just seems like Joshua hit so hard that the force managed to get through Jake's arms and still hurt his body and still hurt his head. But yeah, I'm just, you're talking about a man who's been out of the ring for a year and a half. No, like a year and three, a year and 4 months. And then a guy who's just visibly running the whole time. And then Joshua, even in his prime, was never good at cutting the ring. So it's like your weakness combined with your inactivity, combined with the other guy just absolutely putting on the burners, and then grappling you anytime you get close or he can't get away from you. And then you have these fucking people talking shit the whole fucking time, and you could clearly hear them the whole fucking time in the corner. Yeah, it's frustrating. But it just felt like I said around that fourth when Paul was exhausted and he didn't have really the energy to be doing much. That's when it felt like, okay, the reason it's even going long is not because he's frustrated anymore, but because Joshua seems to really be enjoying fucking up Jake. Because there was clear moments where I could see that Joshua knows his hands are down. He knows Jake's hands are down and his chin is visibly open, but he will still target his body that's being blocked by his arms, by Jake's arms, and he would still throw his punches there because he knew, like I said, he hit so strong. It's like the force was still channeling through his arms and still hurting his stomach, his liver areas, to where it's like it's still taking away your air and your stamina, no matter if you're blocking them. You're still feeling all that pain despite you blocking them in your abdomen area. So that's when it started to feel like Joshua was kind of playing with his food because like I just literally said, like there was moments where I could visibly see that he knows Jake's jaw and fucking temple, everything in his head is fucking open for a crazy hook, a crazy upper, a crazy straight down the pipe fucking right hand, and he wouldn't throw it. He would purposely throw it to the stomach area that's being blocked by Paul's arms, and he would just continuously do that. So that's or the when he would throw it up to the head area, Paul was blocking. So it was like he was purposely throwing where Paul was blocking to kind of fuck him up to be like, hey, it doesn't matter if you block, it's still hurting you. And there was moments where he, even though he blocked it, he seemed to be dazed. Like there was like two or three instances where I saw him block a punch that even though it was blocked, like the cherry on top is like Joshua didn't land it right. So not only is it not landed right, but it was blocked. But there was moments where, like I said, there was like two or three moments that I noticed where something like that happened, where Joshua landed not so good, uh, landing a punch on a blocked area by Paul, and Paul still visibly looked like dazed or like vision is getting blurry, and he either like did the hugging tackle thing or he like would lean forward and act like Joshua would pin him down to the ground and he fell. Also, like that time when Joshua fell on him, the repeat clearly shows that he didn't land on his nuts. So that's obviously Jake Paul trying to, do a little tactic, which is pretty impressive that he was, he had the mindset to like the veterans to kind of use little tactics to buy you time. Or it's like when a veteran purposely throws out his mouthpiece on the ground after getting punched because he's just like, you know what, I need a break, you know, stuff like that. So it's just like, oh, Jake was like, oh, this is perfect. This who fell on me. People are not really gonna know. I'm gonna just say he fell on my nuts and that, I need time. Because for those who don't know, if you're as a male, if you're injured, like if you get punched there, or in this case, supposedly Joshua fell on his nuts. If anything in your nuts area happens, the ref, you have, you have not the privilege, but you have the option of taking 5 minutes to recuperate. Like, you just pace back and forth, or you could wait at a corner and be like, yeah, I'm gonna take my 5 minutes. Granted, no one really does that because it's not really needed. At most, you probably just need like 30 seconds before being like, okay, with all that adrenaline pumping. But it just seemed like Paul was like, fuck, like, I need a break. This is the perfect excuse. I could get a break right now. And he got it. He got his 35 seconds of break, and then went right back into fighting. There was also a point where he got hurt in the body area. Like I said, he blocked it, but the force still channeled through to his body, passing the arms. And Paul was like, oh, my leg. I twisted my leg. But then the moment he went down and got back up, he wasn't limping anymore, and he wasn't like taking care of his. Not even in that moment. Like the rest of the fight after that, his ankle didn't have any problem. And then they showed the repeat, and there was no point where his ankle twisted or it looked like he stepped wrong and fucked it up. So it's just moments like that. Like he was visibly like lost, didn't have a game plan, didn't have anything, no confidence in himself, knew that there was nothing he could absolutely do but try to survive. And even in that plan of just trying to survive, it wasn't going good for him, and it was going terrible, and it was just a matter of time that he was just trying to pull anything out of his ass, saying that Joshua fell on his nuts when they fell to the ground, and trying to get time like that, saying like, oh, I twisted my ankle because I stepped wrong, or we clashed together and whatever. It was just stuff like that where it was just like, okay, this guy's just losing it. He doesn't know what to do. And Joshua was seemingly having fun around those times, like fifth and sixth round. And it just seems like he was just having fun. And then, came the infamous, pretty viral now, straight right hand to the jaw that ended up um, pretty much breaking his jaw. Not as bad, but it broke it in two places. And yeah, I mean, that's just the inexperience. Like, for example, like the reason he landed a straight right jaw is because, like I said, Joshua the whole time was just conditioning him to where even though Paul was guarding his body, Joshua was still throwing at his body and was just for like not doing anything to his chin. And then he would throw all the punches in the body that were being guarded. So that sixth round, when he had him in the corner, Joshua threw a jab at the body, straight hands all the way down by Paul, trying to block it. Face was wide open, and instead of throwing again to the body, he was like, "No, I'm throwing this straight right to the chin," and he threw it, and it fucking clocked the hell out of him. I do gotta give Jake props. Punches like that, even heavyweight fighters would have gone, fucking honk shoe fucking memes, but he didn't. Granted, others would have got knocked out and probably not having their jaw broken, but he didn't go night. He didn't go memes, but he did have a fucking broken jaw. Like that punch alone broke his jaw in two separate places. Um, Now what do I think, future wise for these guys? I mean, what more is there to say? Joshua, I think, you know, he just has to learn how to cut the ring a lot better. I feel like the reason Ngannou was able to last l- little uh, less than Paul was that Ngannou didn't have that in mind of being like, I'm gonna run and avoid this guy. Ngannou's plan was like, I'm gonna box him mid to close range, and I'm gonna be there with him. Like, I'm not gonna purposely avoid him. I'm not gonna purposely run the whole time. I'm not purposely gonna try to hold him and wrestle him anytime he does something or gets too close to me and he's wanting to unload his punches. But that was Paul's plan, and as you can see, that's why I bought him more time than we all expected him to have. But going on to the future, I really like the idea that Joshua's training with Usyk's team. I think there's a great set of people with a lot of knowledge that, it's not just the coaches, it's like the fighters that the coaches have too. So it's like other fighters, even if they don't even have half of the accomplishments of Joshua, they could still give them pointers. They could still um, teach him ways of training or different ways to train a certain uh, exercise that Joshua would have never thought, you know, and that could really help him out. And Usyk himself, the guy that beat you twice in a row, even when you tried your hardest in the gym and your hardest in the fight, he still couldn't beat you. You still couldn't beat him. So it's like just surrounding yourself with that people and like humbling yourself to be like, you guys are better than me. You guys proved it twice in a row. I would like for you guys to help me out in my last attempt, on my last strive to become a world champion once again. So I think he should continue training. Obviously he's gonna take a little break, probably like a month, and then go back into training. He doesn't have to train super hard, but like go back in there and focus on using your jab more, um, getting a little bit more footwork, and getting a little bit more training, more reps into cutting the ring before entering a fight. Just focus on that before accepting a fight. Just train on working those things out. And then, like I said, my fight and my boxing news. Check out that video, the second boxing news that I posted, boxing news and stuff. I mentioned the fighters that I think would be a good match for Joshua as his tune-up fight before Fury, because it's already been stated that even though Joshua's saying like, "Hey, I'll go straight to Fury right now. It doesn't matter." It's already been kind of like stated that it's not gonna happen that way. That Joshua is gonna have to wait for Fury to kind of have a tune-up fight, a welcome back fight before stepping in the ring with Joshua. So I would say that the best thing for Joshua is to not wait all those months, is to get back in there in the ring at around the same time that Fury does, and have the same thing, have a tune-up fight that where you could still implement the things that you're working on, the new things that you're working on, and it's gonna help sell the fight either way. So go check out that video if you want to see who I personally said were kind of the best options for not only Joshua but for Fury himself. But in terms of Jake, obviously Jake's gonna have to just, he's just gonna have to wait. Right now he's hurt. Right now he's, he has a broken jaw. That kind of takes a bit. And a valid point that Eddie Hearn said, promoter of Joshua Matchroom Boxing, is yeah, sometimes guys who get a broken jaw come back and they even feel like they're stronger, like their jaw got stronger, or they don't recover the same way, and they're easily more susceptible to getting knocked out or getting hurt by punches from people that before the injury you would have never imagined could even wobble them, let alone knock them out. So Jake has to, he has to wait on that. He has to go through a process of just healing his jaw. So I'm pretty sure he's not going to be able to really seriously plan on his next match until like summer, I would say. Because the time he's going to have to take off and recover, and then the time after, like once the doctors give you the okay, you still got to get like a little bit of recovery and go with another doctor of like how to deal with like, bone exercise. And then he would have to get back in the rhythm of being in the gym again, putting his body back in shape. And then he would have to be like, okay, what's next? He can't just be like, okay, I'm healed. I'm doing these other exercises with this other doctor, recovery wise for my jaw. Let's go straight into a camp. No, he's gonna be kind of out of shape, you know. So like I said, after recovery is 100% completed and he's back to 100%, he's going to have to need a little bit of time, like at least 2 months, to put himself back in the rhythm of working out and boxing and being fit before he goes, okay, let me schedule a fight and let me go into training camp. Who do I think would be? I don't know. It's hard to say. He could maybe do Gervonta Tank Davis again. It's just weird because like many fighters, when they lose, especially a big matchup, they kind of do the same thing. They get an easy fight, an easy tune-up back fight that they know that they could win, just kind of give them their confidence back and bring them back little by little to the same position that they were in. And Jake Paul fighting Gervonta kind of feels that way. Jake Paul could still lose to Gervonta. I'm not saying he can't. I'm just saying it's a lot easier fight out than many of the fights he could do out there. Like Ngannou now probably will be more willing to fight Jake Paul now that he saw that Joshua was able to do. Joshua was capable of accepting it, and what Joshua did to Jake. I see a world where Ngannou is more acceptable success to accepting a fight with Paul, but I don't think Paul will want to jump back into the ring with somebody like that, you know. So he's gonna want to be in the ring with someone that he knows he could win at least the next two fights before he jumps back into really serious fights. And I think those fights for him, if he's supposedly really considering becoming a world champion at cruiserweight division, which supposedly he is trying to do, then he should focus on getting fights against cruiserweight journeyman, and to also help put himself in the rankings, because that's what you gotta do. You just gotta put yourself in the rankings as high as you can to be taken serious. But yeah, I would say so. I would say he would have to, he would probably want to come back to Gervonta Tank Davis. That would be an exhibition, so it wouldn't be an actual fight. So it's not on his professional record. Even though if it looks like he lost, like he clearly lost, it still wouldn't be a loss in his record because it would be an exhibition match. So yeah, he could probably come back to with Gervonta Tank Davis, especially by that time. Like I said, it would be around the beginning of summer, or something like that, like 2 weeks before the beginning of summer, that he would actually be seriously considered like making another boxing event. And by then, I mean, Gervonta should be, I don't want to say available, but I think it would be easier because the whole supposedly he wants to rematch Pitbull, but then he also said that this year was his last year and he was retiring. You just never know with Tank. But he could either do that, or he could do a fight with like Edgar Berlanga is like a perfect matchup for me, because Edgar Berlanga is one of those guys who, even though he makes 168, he's exactly like Jake. He's as tall as him, and he comes in at cruiserweight level. Like when he fought Canelo, Edgar Berlanga weighed 195. So it's like he's coming in at a cruiserweight threshold. So it's like, plus Berlanga is more about money and fame than he is about legacy and championship fights. So I don't see why he wouldn't do it. To put his name out there farther than farther than it already is. Especially to the casuals, he wants to push his name out there more. And hey, who knows? And it'll be a cracking fight because Berlanga is not very experienced, skilled, and technical. He's a very rough, hard hitting puncher. And against Jake, I feel like their matchups and their size and their physicality, it would be an entertaining fight. Like I genuinely would be surprised if that fight happened and it didn't, and it wasn't entertaining and it wasn't a back and forth fight. Like that fight would be entertaining for me at least. I feel like it would on paper. So something like that could be a possible comeback future fight for Jake. But it really depends on what road he wants to go. Whether he wants to keep going on the road of just making big money fights and big spectacles and events, or if he wants to keep supposedly trying to put himself in the rankings and become one day a future champ at cruiserweight division. You know, but that's up to him and that's up to his team after he's given the green light that he's 100% recovered. But yeah, and as term of what I believe Joshua should do, I still believe Joshua should keep training with Usyk, keep, and like I said, working on the things he needs to work on, which is cutting the ring, controlling the range, and using his jab. Keep working on that in the gym, and then when you accept the fight, you know, try to like fight against your opponent, but also remember like, hey, I could use this fight to practice what I could do to Fury, if that makes sense. And like I said, go check out my other video. If you want to know who exactly I said were good matchups for Joshua and Fury in their tune-up fights that they have scheduled before they face each other late 2026. Ladies and gents, thank you very much for watching this. Thank you very much for taking time out of your day to hear me fucking yap. And yeah, I hope you guys liked. Make sure to subscribe if you haven't, or if you're new. If you want to check out videos, I would highly recommend, and I hope you do check out other videos that I have posted. Without being further ado, thank you very much. Have a good day.